So Hannah, so we have to move on, which we've collaborated with you on. So this was a collaboration between Suffolk Archives, British Symphonia, and the National Horse Racing Museum and Orchestras Live. And it was inspired by the story of a man called Fritz Ball, a Jewish lawyer and musician, I believe, who fled Nazi Germany with his family and his cello. Now, I know Suffolk Archives had researched his story in quite a bit of detail, hadn't you, using his memoir, which was provided by his granddaughter. And I just wondered if we could start there, really, and just if you could tell me a little bit more about, yeah, sort of how you came to finding out about Fritz and how that kind of led to the project and its, and the beginnings of it, really.
Yeah, so this all started in about August 2020 when Fritz's granddaughter, a lady called Sandra, got in touch with us just by email to our main archives inbox and told us that her grandparents had lived in Suffolk in Newmarket as Jewish refugees during World War II. And very fortuitously, her grandfather Fritz had written a short memoir about his experiences, initially sort of living under the Nazis in Berlin and then escaping and coming to the UK in 1939. And she's translated the memoir from its original German, and she was asking us whether we would like to have a copy of it for the archives, which brilliant. And we went off to have a look at whether we had anything in the collection already that reflected this story at all, and just drew a complete blank. So this was brilliant that this story suddenly appeared. It started off with this one man and his wife, so Fritz and Eva, two people who were living in Newmarket. As you mentioned, the rest of their family, their three sons, did escape as well, but they were all separated. Their eldest son, Peter, he actually left independently in late 1938. He was only 15, and he got on a boat over to America and stayed with an aunt in New York. So off he went. They didn't know when they might see him again. And then the two younger boys, they were 10 and 12, and they managed to get them places on the Kinder transport to come to England in March 1939, and Fritz and Eva finally got out in May 1939. So they're quite an unusual family in that the children who escaped on the Kinder transport, more often than not, were never reunited with their families. And in the Balls case, fortunately, that wasn't true. They did all get back together again. But for at least 3 years, Fritz and Eva were living in Newmarket, and the two younger boys, even though they were in the UK, they were down in Surrey, and they were in touch and had visits, but they weren't living together again for about 3 years. So we started off with this one family and this memoir, and Fritz is brilliant at describing people and places and then gives no names or addresses. So we started off with all these clues and all these questions, and we wanted to try to find out basic things like where exactly in Newmarket was he living. And he gives this wonderful description of this house that had been given as a hostel by a wealthy Englishman, that their room looked out onto this very clean and spacious courtyard with stabling for horses, which in most towns, that would be a really helpful clue. In Newmarket, it's a bit less helpful. And so we then turned to other records to try to fill in that gap. And fortunately, the 1939 register, which was a big list of all the population in England and Wales that was made just as the war started, they're recorded in there. And there's an address of Palace Stables House. And that led us to the National Horse Racing Museum. So what was Palace Stables what was Palace House is now the National Horse Racing Museum, and the building that they were living in is part of the National Horse Racing Museum today. It's their main entrance and gift shop and cafe and some of their main permanent galleries. So we contacted the National Horse Racing Museum very early on to say, did you know about this? Did you know your building was used as a refugee hostel in World War II? And their reply was, we kind of heard vaguely something about this, but we've never been able to get to the bottom of it. So Fritz's memoir arriving really shone a light on this story that had almost been completely forgotten about. And not only did we, once we'd found his address, that also told us that it wasn't just Fritz and Eva living there. There were 25 people living there, all refugees, in September 1939. And from some other records, we found some other names too. So it was a substantial operation. And that kind of set the tone for this whole project, really, that every time we answered one question and went through the door that answered that, there were 3 more doors behind that and 3 more doors behind each of them. And so the research aspect of it just kind of snowballed. We had all of these names we wanted to research. And given this story had almost been completely forgotten about, we wanted just to share this story with more people. And Sandra, Fritz's granddaughter, she was very happy for that to happen and keen that should happen as well. And the fact that Fritz was an extremely good cellist gave us the idea that music would be a good way to share this story.